Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with another product pan update. This is going to be my Pan That Palette update, and this is actually probably my favorite product to do and watch. I absolutely love it because you get to focus on eyeshadows, which is of course my favorite makeup item, and also it's just about using up your things, and I just feel like it's so satisfying to track this project. So I'm excited to share with you where I stand with my palettes today. I am working on two palettes if you're new to this project. One is a rollover from last year, and that is my Soft Glam palette. I planned this one last year, but I had a couple of shades left in this. I think I had 7 left at the beginning of the year. So I decided to roll it over and keep working on it in 2025 to hopefully have this one completely done by the end of the year. And then on top of that, because I only had, a handful of shades left, I wanted to also introduce a second palette, which in this case for the year is a BYOP. I have a BYOP with 12 shades in it that I'm working on alongside the Soft Glam palette. So I'm going to jump into the video and share with you the progress on these two palettes. But before I do so, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. Alright, so we are starting off with the Soft Glam palette, which I mentioned first, and this, like I said, is a palette that I worked on last year. This is what the palette looked like when I first introduced it, so you can see where I was starting and where I was sitting from the end of last year. I had a lot of the palette already used up, and I had pan on all of the remaining shades. I did decide to franken this palette so you can see what it looks like after frankening. I wanted to create some more kind of everyday crease shades for me to have an easier time with this palette because a lot of the shades left were so dark. So that's what it looked like after frankening, and here it is after 1 month of use. This is last month's update. You can see a little bit of use here and there and a couple of shades. So that is where it stood at the last update. It has been 1 month since then. We are in February, which is a bit of a shorter month, but it still has been 1 month since then, and I've continued working on this palette, and this is what it looks like today. So hopefully you can see some differences. I definitely can, and I'm really excited with what this palette looks like right now. So like I said, that is the palette. I will have the comparison pictures, of course, but this is the little overview so you can have a look at the palette again, and I will talk you through each shade in order. So the first shade in the palette is one of the Franken shades, and this is a mix between Dusty Rose and the shade Orange Soda. These two together make a beautiful crease shade for me, and this is one that I focused on a little bit in the last month. I had used it twice already in the first month. This one was in the project since I Frankened it, but I decided to use it a bit more in the past month, and I reached for it 7 additional times. And as you can see, I was able to pan on the shade, and it took me 8 additional uses, or 8 uses in total to pan on that shadow. So that is my first pan with this palette for the last month, which again I'm very excited for. Next up we have another Franken shade, and that is a mix between the shade Mulberry, which is the last shade on the top row, and then a shade from my Franken palette, which is a NYX beige shade, which I have depotted, and these two make this beautiful, more cool tone, kind of mauvey transition shade. It's very, very beautiful, and it's another one that I focus a little bit more on in the past month. I used it twice the first month in the project, and I have reached for it 5 additional times in the past month for a total of 7. And as you can see, I was able to pan on the shade as well. So we do have these 2 new pans, and that one took me, what was it? And that one took me 6 uses to pan on, so I have reached for it 1 more time after hitting pan as well. Moving on to the next 2 shades right next to it, which are these 2 right here. We have Orange Soda first, which is one of the original shades in the palette, and that one I actually didn't use at all in the past month. It's more of a summery type of shade for me, so I've been focusing more on these kind of like neutral to cool tone shades in the palette, so no uses yet. And the next one, even though it is a cool tone shade, this is a Franken as well, and this is a Franken between Cypress Umber, which is this dark shade right here, and again that NYX beige shade, and those 2 together make this a cool tone shade, like I said. And this is one that I reached for a little bit more in the first month. I reached for it 3 times, but I haven't reached for it at all since then, so no uses there. And I forgot to say as well, Orange Soda I reached for once in the first month in the project. Lastly, on the first row we have the shade Mulberry, which is another original shade to the palette, and unfortunately this is another one that I have not reached for in the past month. I have just been kind of focused on specific shades and neglected a couple of the others, which is absolutely fine. I still have lots of time with other shades, so I feel like I'm going to continue splitting my use, and we'll see what I end up focusing on. But yeah, Mulberry doesn't have any additional uses, and in the first month I reached for that one twice, so that is kind of where Mulberry stands today. Moving on to the second row though, we do have some more success. The first shade is Dusty Rose, which is a bit more of a cool tone shade again. It's been a really lovely shade to use, and I have used it quite a bit in the past month. So the first month this shadow was in the project, I only reached for it once, but like I said, it is one that I have focused more on in the past month, and I have reached for the shade 7 additional times for a total of 8. That is where I'm standing with Dusty Rose today. I'm hoping there is some pan expansion. I can definitely see like the pan getting lower at least, but you will see the pictures before I do. Well, I mean, at the time of uploading I would have seen the pictures, but right now filming I haven't looked back at the comparisons yet, but we'll see. I'm hoping again there will be some pan expansion. We have 2 more Franken shades right next to it, which I have not used in the past month. Again, I've been focusing more on these 2 Frankens in the past month because I wanted to hit those 2 pans, and the first one is the shade Mulberry mixed with a white, and then next to that we have Rustic mixed with the NYX beige shade again. So those 2 right there. I have not reached for it all, however I did reach for both of those one time each in the first month they were in the project. Alright, so next to that though, we do have a very exciting update, and that is this empty pan, as you can see right here. That used to be in the palette, and you can see that in the comparisons as well. That was one of the original shades from the palette called Sienna. It was this beautiful kind of rusty mid-toned brown, and I really love that shade. It was a beautiful kind of out the corner shade. It wasn't too deep, and it also had that kind of warm, cozy undertone to it. That's the best way I can describe it. I feel like Mulberry is like a similar type of like warmth in it. I don't know. I just am very drawn to those type of shades. But Sienna I did finish up, like I said, and with that shade I have used it very evenly since I started this project again this year. I reached for it 11 times the first month and 11 times this past month for a total of 22 uses this year to finish it. However, I did reach for it 140 times last year, so the total tracked uses to finish that shade was 162 uses, which is of course very high, but yeah, it's fun to see where, you know, the uses fall, but 162 is what I expected for that shade, and I'm glad to have another empty in this palette, which means that we only have 6 of the original shades left, which is the shade Orange Soda, Dusty Rose, Rustic, Cypress Umber, Noir, and Mulberry. So those are the only kind of original shades that we have left. The rest in this palette is Frankens. Then we have 3 final shades left to go. We have the shade Rustic right here, which I did not reach for it much. I reached for it once. So that one is standing at 3 total uses. And this here is Cypress Umber. I reached for this exact same. I reached for 1 additional use for a total of 3 in the project. And then lastly we have the shade Noir, which I actually reached for twice, but I only reached for it once in the first month, so again 3 total uses. And that is the palette now. Really happy. I would say that I was successful with my goals for this palette. I believe last month I did set a goal to finish Sienna, which I did, and I also wanted to hit 2 more pans, which I did in these 2 shades. So goal completed with this palette right here, and I will talk through the weight of this palette in a second, but I'm going to focus on the other palette first and let you know the uses on that one, and then we'll move into the weights. Alright, so we have my BYOP next, and this one is one that I created to have as a companion palette to the Soft Glam palette, mainly with like some sparkly indie shadows. There is 2 mattes in here, which is that beige shade that I talked about a lot, which was used for Franken, and then also a Colourpop small single, which is kind of like a nice transition shade again. But I'm gonna roll a footage of what this palette looked like so you can see all of the shades. And yeah, again, you can see that it's just so many beautiful shadows in here. I did pan on some of them at the beginning, but yeah, not all of them. And I will also insert a footage now of what it looked like after frankening. I didn't franken anything in here, but I did use some of that beige shade, of course, to franken the Soft Glam palette. So that is what it looked like at that point. This is what it looked like last month after 1 month of use, so that is kind of my first update. I was able to pan on 1 shade, which is the center shade of those kind of bigger singles, and that is the shade Starlight from the Pastel Roses. Really love that shade quite a bit, so that was one that I focused in on last month. And this is what the palette looks like today. So again, we do have some changes to the shades, some I've used a bit more than others, but of course I will talk you through all of that in a second when I go through the usage, but I'll let you have a second to look at the overview initially. Alright, so that is the palette again, so you can see what it looks like. I will go ahead and talk through each shade in order. So the first shade in the palette is Terra Moon's Cinnamon Sugar, and this is one that I wanted to focus on in the past month. I actually set a 10 use goal for this shadow, and unfortunately I wasn't able to hit that. I was hoping to do that, but I just kind of forgot about my usage goal with this shadow until later in the month, and then I just didn't have time to completed. So I did reach for it once in the first month and then 4 additional times in the past month for a total of 5. So yeah, nowhere near that 10 use goal, but I'm still happy that I got 4 uses on it. Then next to that we have a very, very exciting shadow. That is the shade Pilkoskowy. I think that's something like that in Polish. I believe it's fairy dust in English, the translation. But that is from Glam Shop, and it is this iridescent shade, which is very, very stunning. And as you can see in the pictures, I was able to pan on the shadow, which I am so excited about. It is quite thin in the pan because I did lose some of the shadow. I believe I already had pan on it and I broke or something like that, and I repressed it, and I think that's why it's so thin. But it is a little bit thinner, so it was easier to hit pan on the shadow. However, I did use this quite a bit before I hit pan on it. I had used this one 6 times already in the past update, and it took me 18 total uses to hit pan on it, but I have also kept using this one more after that point, and I reached for it 20 times in total this past month for a total of 26 in the project so far. I'm actually wearing this one today on my inner corners, and that is mainly how I've been using it, is as an inner corner highlight. Sometimes I use it as a topper as well, but mainly as an inner corner highlight. Then next to that we have a pastel rosy shade, and that is the shade Bismuth right here. It is a multi-chrome. You can see the blue base right there and like the pink sheen. When I look at it, I can see more kind of goldeny orange, which is very interesting. It's definitely a very shifty shadow. I'm actually wearing that one today, topped over my nail polish as a nail polish topper, so I got some use on it there. But there's another one that I'm trying to slowly focus on because it's not the easiest shade for me to reach for on a daily basis. But I'm still trying to incorporate it into my looks to keep those uses up. And in the first month I reached for that one twice, so not too much. However, this past month I reached for it 11 times for a total of 13 in the project, which I'm happy to see. Moving on to the second row of those bigger singles, we have the shade Bombawi, which is also from Glam Shop. And this one I reached for 3 times in the first month, but only once this past month for a total of 4. So maybe a slight pan expansion, but I'm not really expecting that after this one initial use. Then we have the shade I hit pan on in the first month, which is again the shade Starlight, and this is one that I focus on quite a bit again the first month. So this month I did take a little bit of a break from it. I did use it 19 times the first month and 2 additional times this past update for a total of 21. So still pretty good, but I just wanted to focus on some other shades in this palette instead in the past month. Next to that we have quite a similar shade. It has a different shift, but the base is quite similar. But you can see this one has more of a green shift, this one has a little bit more neutral type of shift to it. But that shade is called Laser, and it's also from Glam Shop. I haven't used that one too much yet. I do absolutely love that shadow, but I have just been focusing on other things. And I reached for that one once the first month and once the second month, so leading up to today, for a total of 2 uses in the project. And on the last row we have another Glam Shop shade First, which is exactly the same. This is the shade Vegas Abyss, and I also have reached for this one 2 times, one each update, so 1 time in the past month as well. So not too much, but I feel like this is more of a autumnal type of shadow for me, so we'll see when I get to it. But I would try to up my uses a little bit on it if I want to finish it before the end of the year. And we are definitely on a bit of a theme because the next shadow is from the Pastel Roses again, and that is the shade Starburst. I always have to double check because this one is Starlight, this one is Starburst. I always mix them up. But Starburst is another one that I reached for once the first update and 1 additional time this past update for a total of 2. It is an absolutely beautiful shadow, but I've not been as into greens recently. I've been into more kind of pinkier mauvier tones, which is why I'm not focusing on this one, but I'm expecting this one to get a lot of use when we get into like summer and autumn, so I'm not too worried about finishing it. So that is where I'm standing with that shade. So then we have this shadow here next, which is that beige NYX shade, and as you might be able to see, I was able to pan on this shadow as well. I have reached for this one a lot. I reached for it as like a cleaning up shade, and I've done so again today. So I get quite a lot of use out of this shadow. I'm looking at my notes to see how many, but I used this one 7 times in the first month, and 19 additional times this past month. So I definitely reached for it more in the last update. So I'm currently standing on 26 uses on it. However, I was able to pan on this one after 24 uses. So I have used since then continued expanding the pan, but that is where this one is sitting, and I'm really excited to have another pan showing this palette. I wasn't expecting to hit 2 pans, but as you can see, I was able to do that, which is of course very thrilling. But yeah, those are all of the bigger rounded singles. So let's move on to the side shades, which are all from Colourpop. This shade right here is the shade Kaleidoscope. I reached for that one 14 times the first month and then 11 additional times this past month for a total of 25. This here is the shade that is the only shade that I haven't reached for in the palette, and that one is the shade Prima Drama. It is a pressed glitter, which is why I'm not really drawn to it. But yeah, I haven't reached for that one at all. Either of the months has been in the project. And then lastly, we have this shade right here, which is Champs. I reached for that one 4 times the first month and 1 additional time this past month for a total of 5. So that is this palette right here. With this one, I did have 2 goals as well. One, well, 3 I guess, with the 10 use on this one, which I didn't quite hit. And then I did have a goal to hit 1 pan, which I surpassed. I hit 2 pans in here, which again I didn't expect. And then the last goal I had was to reach for this palette No Pan Left Behind, which I kind of feel like I completed. The only one I did not reach for is Prima Drama. I thought about putting it on my eyes today, but I didn't go with the look that I wanted to do. So it is what it is. I think I will try to incorporate that one as a nail polish topper because I love using pressed glitters for that. So next time I paint my nails, I think I will use that one as the topper for that. Alright, so those are the 2 palettes and the progress on them. What I'm going to do next is just go through the weights, and then I'm going to kind of wrap up this update, I guess. So we're going to start off with the Soft Glam palette again and talk you through the weights. So this palette I have reached for, of course, in 2024 as well. So I'm going to start with the weights in 2025. So at the beginning of 2025, this palette weighed 156.09 grams. So that is my starting point. And the remaining amount that I had left to use in 2024, if I look at the advertised weight and what I used in 2024, I need to finish up 3.75 additional grams in 2025, and that means that I have to finish up an average of 0.31 grams per month. And in the month of January, I did surpass that amount. I was able to reach for 0.36 grams. So yeah, very happy with that. And at that point, the palette weighed 156.12 grams. So that was last month's weight. This past month, I have not been able to reach for it as much as I would have wanted. It now weighs 156.02 grams, which means that I was able to reach for 1/10 of a gram exactly, which is less, of course, than I wanted. I was hoping to finish up more, especially because I did finish up Sienna, but I am kind of granting that partly because February is a shorter month, and I feel like I never have good progress in February, but it is something that I need to keep in mind and hopefully be able to like increase my usage so I can finish this palette up before the end of the year. But that is where this palette sits today. And then for my Franken palette, this one at the introduction weighed 155.73 grams, but of course I don't have an advertised weight for this one because it is a BYOP. However, in January, I was able to finish up 0.66 grams, so a very high amount, and I was very happy with that amount. And at that point, the palette weighed 154.58 grams. And today, the palette weighs 154.03 grams, which means that I was able to finish up more than half of a gram, is 0.55 grams, which I'm very happy to see. I think that is a good amount of use. And adding all of that up, that means that in February, in both of these palettes, I was able to finish up 0.65 grams, which I am very pleased with. It's not as high as I would have wanted because I do have an unofficial goal to finish a gram of each, combined, from these two. So I'm of course behind, but it is okay. February, like I said, is usually a lower month for me, but I will continue pushing and hopefully I can increase that number for March to compensate for the lack of grams in February. So I think for next month, I'm not going to set any specific goals for like hitting pan or usage or anything like that because I feel like I did that really well this month. But I do just want to increase seeing the grams. So I just going to want to reach for these how I want to reach for them because I do want to see those grams being hit. So I feel like what I'm going to set for a goal is just to hit those 2 weight goals. So at least 0.31 grams out of the Soft Glam palette and at least 1 gram combined from both of them. I think that's what I'm going to set for my goal, and I'm just going to kind of see what I want to reach for and try to get use out of them that way. But that is actually going to be it for this update. I've been filming for quite a while. I'm on my lunch break and I need to go back to work, so I'm going to wrap up the video right here. Let me know also, of course, if you're doing a panda palette yourself. Let me know your progress and how you're getting on. I love reading your updates in my comment section, so please do let me know. And otherwise, I hope you guys are having an amazing day wherever you are, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye guys.